Yo, what's up everybody? It's Drewberry back with another Snap or Pass. This time we're talking about the December Season Pass card, and that is Sebastian Shaw, a 3/4. When this card permanently gains power, gain +2 more power, wherever this is. Now, I wanted to go to the extra mile because I appreciate you guys coming here and hanging out with old Drewberry for this Snap or Pass, but I know that these Season Pass cards can be pretty easy snaps. So there's not a whole lot to think about. You get all the cosmetics, you get the in-game currencies, you get the new card. But I wanted to go the extra mile. I wanted to give you guys as much information that I could possibly conjure up about this card. So in today's video, we're going to not only just talk about mechanics, counters, and deck lists, but I also have every single card and location that's going to buff or activate Sebastian Shaw. Okay, very important information there, as well as some DATAMINE combos and in a comparison to a very similar card that I see a lot of people comparing to Sebastian Shaw. And I want to kind of break down the differences and why I think they're actually both good for the game. But the big question that I have, and I'm interested to hear what you guys think, is this card going to compete with the past Season Pass cards that have been released? They've been insane, right? We go back to Loki, probably still the most broken card in the game. And then you got Elsa Bloodstone, who was amazing upon her release, had to get nerfed. And then you had Miss Marvel, who was honestly the best card of November, and it surprised myself and I think a lot of people. So then we have Shaw. Is he going to compete? I don't know, time will tell. But look at what else is in the spotlight caches. We got Jeff. It's Jeff. If you don't own Jeff, this makes it a pretty easy open week, I think, because he's still the best 2-drop in the game. I don't think he's ever going to be changed, so he's a very valuable card to have in your collection. Man-Thing is a great card as well. I personally love Man-Thing. I think it was my favorite card from October, and it works really well in junk lists and just a pretty good value in control lists. The power swing is pretty substantial. So Man-Thing's a pretty good option, and then Stegron is just a fun card. So if you don't own Jeff, I think it's worth it, but otherwise I'd probably hold out because Man-Thing and Stegron are Series 4 and they only cost 3,000 tokens, so you can probably save up for those if you really want them and hold on to your spotlight caches. But you do you. Let's get to the mechanics of Sebastian Shaw. The most important thing that you can understand about Sebastian Shaw is how the line in his text works: permanent power. So that's a little bit different, right? We're familiar with ongoing effects that can provide power on the board, those aura effects. And then we also have on reveal effects that give power immediately, but which one constitutes as permanent power, or does it mean base power? Well, I have a graphic that I'm going to show you in a bit that has all of the cards that actually activate his ability as well as the locations that will work with Shaw. But to clarify what's not going to work, those ongoing effects, they are not going to activate Shaw's ability. We're talking like Blue Marvel, Captain America, even an enemy Red Skull that's giving you that power. That's not going to activate Shaw's ability. They're temporary effects that can be disabled. It's not permanent power. But what's also not permanent power is base power. So this card, Sebastian Shaw, he can still get countered by Shadow King. If Shadow King hits him, all that bonus power, that permanent power that he received from cards like, let's say, Ironheart as an example, he is going to go back to his base power of 4. So base power can't be disrupted, and yet it is also permanent, but those buffs that he's getting are also permanent. It's a weird little like text word change up, but I think it's going to make sense when you see the cards that actually work with Sebastian Shaw. And then wherever this is, that's referencing the board, deck, and hand. But there's another sneaky little interaction here. His ability will activate if he's on board, but not yet revealed. You're probably wondering, when would that ever come into play? Well, here are two interesting situations. One, Elsa Bloodstone, right? You play that card as the 4th card, Sebastian Shaw, and Elsa's on the board. She's going to give that +2 power to Shaw, and then his ability is going to activate, and he's going to get +2, so that by the time that he actually flips over, he will have received 4 power. This is a little bit different. Glenn was saying that typically cards that have not been revealed do not have their abilities yet. So they had to go into the coding and do a little switch up so that interaction would actually work. Another interesting application for this is Alioth. Alioth destroys Shaw before he reveals. Well, your null, let's say it's out there, is actually going to get the power as if he had been buffed. So whatever power he had been accumulating, right, when he's face down, Null will actually receive all of that, not just the base power. Because I think typically the way you would understand it is he's not going to accumulate, he's not going to showcase that power until he is flipped over, because then his ability comes into play. That's typically how it works, but not with Shaw. He's going to actually accumulate that wherever he is, doesn't matter where he is, deck, hand, unrevealed, doesn't matter. He's getting that power, which is kind of neat. Some pros and cons when it comes to Sebastian Shaw. Fast and powerful scaling. This is one of the higher scaling cards that we've seen in Marvel Snap, in my opinion. Even though it's only +2, it's very easy to give him power. And if he's getting power, then he's growing in power, and then he's also giving himself power. So it's going to just get out of hand. It's so easy to get this card to easily 7 or more power, right? Just by default, if you give him 1 power, that's 3. He's going to go to a 3/7. That's incredible value on its own right. That's like just 1 Nova explosion. Easy to do. Lots of power to be had, and we could even scale that further with a +2 from Surfer. That's another 4. Then we're a 3/11, and we're laughing. So good. He also has very few direct counters, but the problem being that the counters that he does have are very popular meta staple cards at the moment, and we're looking at Shadow King and Shang-Chi, and also another one, Valkyrie. Not as popular, but she completely destroys this card as well. So those 3 counters are really bad, but when you look past that, there's not a whole lot that's going to get in the way of Sebastian Shaw. So I kind of like that about this card. Another thing is the common locations that are going to give a big boost. There might only be 6, but you probably see these 1 in every 3 games, at least. They're so common. Well, they have the same rarity as other common locations, but I happen to see these a lot. So it makes me think, okay, he's actually going to find a lot of value just from the locations rolling and benefiting and giving him a lot of power. Not to mention, I think some of those locations end up as hot locations or feature locations quite frequently. So when those come around, this card's going to be nuts. Another thing is the con. So he does require some support, right? Of course, like he can't give himself power unless something else does, then he's going to apply more. So you do have to have one other card or one other location that's helping him out. Another thing is narrow application for deck building. This, in my opinion, is probably the worst part about Shaw. I don't think at the end of the day, when the dust settles, that he's going to be in a lot of decks. I think he's going to be pretty much a Silver Surfer card. And that's it, to be honest. I've brewed up a few lists. We're going to have a look. I think it's going to be fun to explore. But 1, 2, 3 weeks after this card's release, I think he's only going to find a home in Silver Surfer lists. And then we're going to get to it, but existing competing cards providing a similar output and maybe have better synergies than Sebastian Shaw, making it difficult to warrant putting him in a deck despite his incredible power output. We'll get to that in a second, but quickly, let's look at the graphic with all of the cards that actually activate his ability. And there you have it. So 12 cards are going to activate Sebastian Shaw's ability. 6 locations, common locations, are going to activate Sebastian Shaw's ability. In particular, Mirror Island is insane. Like that's +1 every turn. That's essentially +3 every turn. He'd scale like crazy. When that's the featured location, oh my goodness, Shaw's going to be the best card. And then the other ones are just kind of like if they happen when he's on in the hand, or you play him at Aunt May's, or you play him at Stark Tower or Shuri's Lab, this sort of thing. It's pretty good. I mean, of course, you're going to get a lot of power. You don't actually have to support him with another card, but you probably are running support cards anyway. I'm looking at Silver Surfer as being probably the best card of this list. Also, Nova Explosion is pretty nice. Nico Minoru for that spell that gives +2 power. That's not too shabby. Forge, pretty good, of course. A very popular card right now. Okoye, if he's in the deck, but then you draw him and then it's not so great. Hulkbuster is pretty good. Get 5 and then +2. It's essentially like a 3/7 Hulkbuster, which is pretty neat. Ironheart with those Wong combinations. Maybe Nakia, maybe Elsa Bloodstone, maybe Shuri, but I don't know if they're going to really pop off as much as Silver Surfer with, I don't know, Brood and all this sorts of things. So I feel like that's going to be his home at the end of the day. But there you go. Might help you out if you take a screenshot of that just so you have it on hand when you're theory crafting or deck building with this card. But now let's talk about the card that everyone's comparing Shaw to, and that is Werewolf by Night. So who does it better? Sebastian Shaw and Werewolf by Night, they are very similar cards, but yet also very different. They don't have on reveals, they don't have ongoing abilities. They're both triggered abilities. Similar stat lines being 3 drops 4 power to 3 power, pretty negligible. They both receive +2 power when a certain condition is met, but the conditions are quite different. For instance, Werewolf by Night is going to get +2 power when an on-reveal card is played. There are so many more on-reveal cards in the game than the cards I just showed you for Sebastian Shaw that are going to activate his ability. So it's a lot easier to deck build with Werewolf by Night. You can just throw that in with like 3 or 4 on-reveals that are probably doing work on their own right, and it's going to be great. Whereas Sebastian Shaw, I think we're a lot more narrow in the application. We're going to have a little bit more difficult time deck building with that card. Now, on the other hand as well, Werewolf by Night, you can move it around. Now, that might not seem great because maybe you want to keep the card there. And I see merits to both sides, but I think Werewolf by Night has proven that the movement is good. Not only can you pair it with Kraven or you discount your Miles Morales in your hand or anything like that, but also you can dodge counters. Your opponent doesn't really want to throw down a Shang-Chi or a Shadow King in a certain lane because if they don't have priority, they might whiff because that card's probably moving around the board, making it difficult to actually counter. Whereas Sebastian Shaw's just chilling. He's in the lane unless your opponent's moving it somehow. It's just in that lane getting a bunch of power, and that's what he's doing. So Werewolf by Night, I think, has the upper hand in a few instances. I think Shaw could actually scale to higher power totals in the right deck, but Werewolf by Night is just a little bit more flexible. Although it's a Series 5 card and costs 6,000 tokens, whereas Sebastian Shaw is the Season Pass card. So in my mind, that just makes it easier to pick him up. So at the end of the day, I do not think one is better than the other. I think they're both going to have their own respective applications and be a lot of fun to have in your collection. I think they're both great for the game, and you could even run them together in a Silver Surfer list, and I think that'd be pretty great. Now, let's talk about some counters for Sebastian Shaw. All right, if you're looking to counter Sebastian Shaw, you could look no further than Shadow King, Shang-Chi, or Valkyrie. Those are your top 3. And I think they're the most popular and the strongest counters. They're just going to absolutely ruin this card. But some other sneaky ones are like Sandman. Maybe Sandman. Basically, I'm putting him there because I'm thinking of the Surfer list that want to play 2-3 cards on turn 6. And if we can limit them to only playing 1, then that limits the amount of power that Sebastian Shaw is going to receive and thus countering the card. But another crazy one is Cosmo. Because pretty much all of the cards that are going to activate Sebastian Shaw's ability are on reveals. So Cosmo on the field is going to limit your opponent's plays and where they can actually put those cards, and maybe even deny an on reveal, which denies power to Sebastian Shaw, which essentially denies his ability. And another crazy one is Mirage. Now, of course, you're hoping that your opponent has Sebastian Shaw as their lowest cost card in their hand, but if they do, you just get a much better Shaw than them. They still have to invest power to get the buffs, whereas you've already done it with Mirage, and that's pretty great. So, which is kind of nasty because that's really popular in Loki lists, and he doesn't need any more support or ability to counter other cards, so yikes. But there you go. Those are some of the counters that I thought up. Ultimately, I don't think it's too bad aside from Shang-Chi, Shadow King. Those are the worst, and they're popular. So you got to watch out for that if you're playing Shaw or Surfer lists. Datamine combos. Now, I don't think there's a whole lot. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people were excited about Firestar being a really good combo with Sebastian Shaw, giving power, of course. But, now she's in the Shadow Realm. Who knows when she's ever going to be released. So she's just kind of a Datamine card chilling there. Then another one is Grandmaster, of course, activating an on-reveal once more. Sebastian Shaw doesn't have an on-reveal, which is actually good in this case because we probably want to focus in on Ironheart or Shuri or something like that to activate our Sebastian Shaw when he gets that power. So I think that's a pretty nice little combo as well. But ultimately, there's not a lot of cards Datamine at the moment that are giving power. But eventually they will. They're going to be released. It's going to happen. Like, this is a very commonplace ability. So I could see that, Sebastian Shaw, anytime a card comes out that is giving power, we're always going to think, oh, that could work with Shaw, which is good future investment if you do want to pick up the card now. And, eventually there's going to be a sweet combo and you might be really excited about that new card and it's going to work with your Shaw. So that always helps add a little bit more value to the card. But now we got to talk about some deck lists. I'm not going to spend too much time on the key synergies because I already talked about that with the cards that actually activate for Shaw. An interesting one is Phoenix Force, right? Phoenix Force is going to resurrect Shaw if he had been destroyed and give him +5 power, and then his ability is going to activate, giving him another +2. I think that's a really fun combination to play with. And now I have an article on CCGHub that's going to be coming out soon where I have a bunch of deck lists and I have have a Phoenix Force list there, so you can go check it out. I'll have the link in the description below. But here I have 3 decks, and man, I just feel like Silver Shaw on the far left is going to be the one. Some kind of shell with Silver Surfer. It's not going to be exactly that, but that's a pretty popular, Silver Surfer list, and I think it's going to do pretty good. We're giving Sebastian Shaw so many opportunities to gain power. It's going to be nuts. You put him behind a storm location, that's pretty nice too, right? Because he has the potential to just keep growing. You could actually almost look at Professor X being another nice combination. You lock in a lane, maybe you're losing by a few points of power, but then you use Ironheart to give that power and buff that Sebastian Shaw. But yeah, I think Silver Shaw is the way to go. You use Sarah, you discount a bunch of stuff. Hopefully we can get Wong out there as well, and then you're playing Silver Surfer, get a bunch of buffs. Your Shaw is going to be like 20 power in this deck. It's going to be nuts and a lot of fun. It can be countered, but it's going to be a lot of fun, and I can't wait. That's going to be my go-to when this card is released. Next up is Shakonda. Now, this is more of just a thematic deck, I would say. It still has some of the stable combinations like Wong, Shuri, Black Panther, and then Armzola, that kind of stuff, which is always a lot of fun. But I just wanted to put as many Wakanda, Black Panther themed cards in the deck as possible. So you got Nakia, you got Ironheart, you got Okoye. You can even throw in Hulkbuster there, I guess. Shuri, of course, Black Panther himself, and then Shaw to receive a bunch of those buffs. I think it'd be a lot of fun. But I don't know how consistent that would be. And that one absolutely gets wrecked by Cosmo more than any other list. So that would be something to be wary of. But the time after time, the Wong Black Panther Arnim Zola combo has proven to be very strong. And if your opponent doesn't have Cosmo, then they're in a world of hurt if you have those 3 cards. So that's always strong. And then Kevin Bacon. I had no reason to call this Kevin Bacon. I just wanted to call something Kevin Bacon because Sebastian Shaw, Kevin Bacon played Sebastian Shaw in the X-Men movies when they go back in time. Anyways, go back and check that out. But this is a destroy list with Shaw. I wanted to put this here because I just wanted to see if this is worth exploring. I think it's a little bit interesting because Deadpool is typically put in a deck with a lot of buffs. We want to get Deadpool up to a high amount of power so that we destroy him, get him back, he doubles, and then we play him, and he's pretty cheap. He ends up being like a 1 for 12 or something along those lines. Well, if we don't draw Deadpool, or maybe while we're doing the Deadpool shenanigans, we got Shaw on the board, might be decent. You use that Nova Explosion to get Deadpool a bunch of power, and you hit Shaw. That's great. We use Forge to give Shaw some power. We got Hulkbuster out there. I think there's a few methods to actually get Shaw to decent power totals. And I think what we're doing here is we're not focusing in on getting him to 3 buffs. 1 buff and we're good. We go to a 3/7, we're happy with that. Maybe after that we use Venom to destroy him, and then we have Null for a big play later on. So I'm curious to see if that ends up working. I imagine that he would be cut eventually because there's just other options in Destroy. They have so many cards to put in their decks that maybe we find something a little bit more synergistic, but I think it's interesting to try out nonetheless. So there you go. Those are my decks that I've brewed up. And then the counters, we talked about all kinds of stuff with Shaw, but at the end of the day, we still got to ask ourselves, is this season pass card a snap or a pass? I have learned my lesson. Now, I said last month that I thought Miss Marvel was probably on the more passable end of season pass cards because at the time I thought her ability was a little bit too difficult to pull off. Well, I will tell you right now, I was entirely wrong. She ended up being fantastic, and I think I've learned 2 lessons with that. 1, the season pass always gives such good value. If you are willing to spend money on this game, it's the best thing that you can buy. Right? And then you end up getting the new card. But then 2, that I think Second Dinner's aim, probably because it does cost money to buy the season pass, is that they're always going to make sure that the season pass card is viable and maybe even a little bit more viable, maybe on the stronger end of things. I don't think they needed to make Sebastian Shaw a 3/4. I think they could have left him as a 3/3, but they gave him that little bit of extra power. I think he's got a lot of scaling potential. I think he's a good card. I think he's going to be a pretty solid card. Maybe not as strong as those past season pass cards that I was talking about, but he's going to do well. He's going to have a good win rate for sure. I have no doubt about that. You put, Cosmo in the lane with Sebastian Shaw, so you protect from the Shang-Chi and that Shadow King, and you're good to go. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope this video helps out with theory crafting for Sebastian Shaw. And if you want to pick him up, go for it. If you don't, I don't think it's the end of the world. All right. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.